exciting panel coming up. So this one is Exploring Chairmans from the Ground Up, and it's moderated by Megan from 971, and we're excited to have Fuzz from 4201, Karen from 3309, Kinney from 498 and 1619, and Kristine from 125. So thank you all so much. I'm excited to see what you all talk about and the insights that we gleaned today. And feel free to take it away, Megan.
All right, hello everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. It's a real pleasure to be here with such an accomplished panel. We're just gonna be kind of casual, so feel free to DM us if you have any questions you'd like us to answer. But the structure that we have right now is to go over the strategy of competing for the Chairman's Award, how we focus on our students, and just some broader philosophies of what it means to compete for chairmans and why our teams do specifically. A little bit about me. I was a mentor. I've been a mentor for 971 since 2017. I've been on a hiatus, so I haven't been super involved on the team since 2019, but just because I'm busy with work and life, and it's also good to explore other things beyond robots at some point. But I've loved working on chairmans, and I've loved reading and writing, and I look forward to being here today. So with that being said, would others like to also introduce themselves? Maybe we can start with Fazlul. Fazlul, is that how you pronounce your name? I don't think we've actually met before.
Yes, it's Fazlul, but everyone calls me Fuzz. Hello, everyone. I'm one of the lead mentors for Team 4201. Over the past few years, we have won chairmans twice and entering inspiration once. Our team is based in El Segundo, California. Pretty large team. It's grown a bit over the years, and this year we have over 60 students that participate, which is, I think, one of the things we'll talk about when we talk about chairmans and competing in chairmans. But looking forward to sharing this panel with all these great people.
Thanks so much. Kitty, if you'd like to go next.
Hi, my name's Kinney Anderson. I was a student on 2486 from like 2011 to 2014. So I was a chairman's presenter for 3 years, and then I've been mentoring a few different teams since then. I was with 1011 for a while, 498 last year, and then this year I've been working a bit with 1619, and we had four chairman's wins on 2486 when I was a student, and then we had an EI and a chairman's win with 498, and then a couple chairman's wins with 1011 as well.
Thank you so much. Kristine?
Yeah, hey, I'm really excited to be here today. I think this is my first West Coast panel that I've been a part of, and specifically for chairmen, which I'm really excited for because ever since our split champs, I feel like I've totally missed out on half of this program's incredible team. So my name is Kristine Atiyeh. I'm a mentor on Team 125, the Neutrons out of Boston, Massachusetts. I'm an alumni of Team 175, Buzz Robotics, which is a Hall of Fame team from way back in the day. My first journey started in 1998 when I was a third grade super fan and went over to my hometown high school to go check out what my grandfather was doing like late at night over at the high school. And he was a mentor for Buzz Robotics, and the rest is history. My two sisters and I went through the program. My dad still mentors our hometown team. And I am currently mentoring 125 in Boston. We have about 60 students that come from about 7 different high schools in the greater Boston area. We have a huge, incredible 100% FRC alumni mentor pool that is both college students and a few people that are technically adults, but sometimes forget that we are. We have a really great team, and I was actually trying to figure out the number of like chairman's wins and stuff as we were asked to do that. And it looks like on paper we have six wins, district wins, which I guess is just getting through like the first like district event win. And then on top of that, we have 4 regional chairman's wins. So that's 1 from South Florida. And then I guess the New England championships would be considered regional. So as a team, we have been around for a long time, but our chairman's journey, like on paper and kind of in the judge books, started not very long ago. So it's been really rewarding to work with a team that's been so deep rooted in giving back and doing more, but never really applied it to any awards. So that is who I am. And I also volunteer with New England First and work with the Compass Alliance, among other things. Really excited to be here and hear from everybody on this panel because there's some big names from some big teams on here. So thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. Karen?
All right, that leaves me. So I'm Karen Kane, and I'm a business mentor on Team 3309, the Friarbots. We're based in Anaheim. We are going into our 11th year, and I've been with the team for 5. We've won chairman's 5 years in a row, and I think that's a huge testament to probably our school and our school's support. Also, our alumni mentors, and Megan actually is from our team. So, hey, big shout out to 339 alumni. We have a huge base of alumni mentors, and honestly, probably our team wouldn't be what it is without our alumni mentors. Our kids graduate, they go to amazing schools, and they come back and they bring all that great knowledge back to our team. Also, our adult mentors, which I'm one of them, and obviously the alumni are as well, but our older mentors are a nice base. We don't have a huge team, probably 20 to 25 students on the team, a lot of new kids this year. So it's going to be a really interesting year. I'm looking forward to it.
All right, thank you so much for sharing, everyone. It was a real pleasure learning more about all of you. Now to get into the meat of the presentation, to make the most out of our time, we'll start with the strategy portion I have established. But the first question that I have is, now that the chairman's submission format has changed, do you think this benefits teams? If so, how? Anybody would like to take this one?
Can we first, for my brain and for everybody that's watching, because it looks like we have a pretty good pool of people watching, the changes that you're talking about, can you just refresh our brains on exactly what they are, and to fill in the people that may not have read through the blog? Because I'm excited for them, but I want to make sure that I actually remember exactly what they are before we start talking about them.
Yeah, let me just pull them up really quickly to get re-familiar, because I want to be as specific as I can without
and because I will admit, my team did not even make it into an actual event this year, so our team's experience with even this past season's new things with the documentation and stuff wasn't as full on, I think, as a lot of other teams who did get to go through the full judging process experience, which I'm really interested to hear about, because I know, at least from the documentation standpoint, we were really we were overthinking it a lot, and we talked a lot to other teams that we work closely with, like 971, 1678, who, when I saw their spreadsheet, I was like, oh, thank you, no thank you. We're gonna go the more simple route of figuring this out. But I know for us, we were really over worried about that, because even though it wasn't required, we knew it would be a reflection on kind of how we looked at the problem and kind of tackled it, or it was our chance to really showcase every single thing that we had done, but how much time were we supposed to invest in it? So I guess, did any of your teams get to actually go through a full judging process in the 2020 season in any capacity? And what was that like for you guys with some of the new things this past season, before we get the even more change, I guess, in the upcoming season?
So we did on our team, full disclosure, we didn't win at that event, but we did have a notebook put together with all of the documentation. And I will tell you, it took a good 3 months to put the documentation together. It's a lot, especially when you're working backwards, right? As you're doing things, it's super easy. You now know the requirements, but the looking back piece, and if you're a team with, any substantial history or, outreach, it's a lot. I think we're fortunate that, like I said, our alumni mentors stay. And so a lot of them held that history, and we were able to reach out to them and get, the documentation, the email, the contact, whatever it was, to help us document an actual event. And then going forward, I think it'll be a lot easier, but it was a lot. Actually, we had a mentor and a student assigned to that for the full season.
Yeah, we're on. I think you're muted, Faz. I don't know if you're.
There you go. Thank you. Yeah, I would definitely echo that. The fact that going back and doing the documentation is quite a bit of a challenge. We actually currently have 3 students and 2 mentors going through that and making sure that we can collect all of that. In terms of the actual event, we did compete in an event at the LA Regional, and we presented our chairmans. We did not win, and our documentation that we took there was very minimal. We didn't invest as much time into actually building it up, and now we're utilizing the fact that we have kind of a longer off season and slash season to motivate the team to put that together. And we're trying to do a better job of collecting all that information, not just because it's for chairmans, but I think having that together is also helpful for the team and helpful to have that information all in one place. So if you want to repeat an event, you want to understand how that event was impactful. It's all in one area. Somebody can come and pick it up and reach out to the same people. So we're kind of looking at it both ways. One, yes, we need to do it for chairmans, but other, yeah, we need to do it just for our team.
We on 498, we didn't get to present. We drove to San Diego, and then the event got canceled like that day. So it was like we drove like 14 hours like round trip or something in 24 hours, which was fun. But we didn't get to present. We won at San Diego though. And we didn't have documentation last year. With 498, we were kind of in a unique, well, I mean, not super unique, but we were in a position where the team had only applied. The previous year was the first year applying, and obviously it's an old team. And so like most of you have spoken to, we had a really hard time trying to go back and figure out how to contact people, how to get evidence of those things. And so it was really challenging for a new team, or for a team that's new to chairman's but old to first, I think, to do that. And I mean, hopefully if you are an older team, like you have additional resources to kind of allocate to that. But I think that it definitely is easier for teams that are just getting started to.
Yeah, I would agree with you. And I think it's one of those like kind of like things that I feel like headquarters strategically and very like, it was a good move on their part to do that, because it's going to help in the long run teams that are just starting chairmans, because the process is very overwhelming. And I know, like right now there's a lot of people that are working like through like Slack and other platforms, but then even in school now, students are getting better at like using like Google Classroom and other things to sort their work and like actually keep track of it in a non-physical form. And I think that this is a good way that FIRST is kind of forcing us to do that, instead of like having like the older teams, like you're saying, have like scrapbooks and newspapers and like just physical versions of it. But it's interesting to hear your experiences like about how you spent so much time on it, because I know for us, we didn't physically go to an event, and we thankfully during our judging process didn't have to submit it, but it's not like we totally skipped it. We definitely started it and worked on it for several months, but we didn't end up competing. But I was just reading through, Megan provided the link in the chat and then in our personal chat for the changes for this coming season, and specific to documentation, I was just reading through this. They said that they had updated the form that can be edited based on some of the suggestions for improvements. And then it says, we also heard feedback on revising the chairman's definitions and worked with the Hall of Fame teams to address some of the concerns raised. So I always like to see that they're really involving like both current Hall of Fame teams that went through the process recently, and then some of those older ones that, are really deep rooted to the like original, I guess, kind of process, which isn't too far off from the one that we had been going through up until recently. And then the question changes, I will say, I'm really happy with. I don't know how many of you on this panel have spent like a ridiculous amount of time just going through and deciphering the difference between some of those 13 questions, and then really making sure that you pay attention to those differences as you finish your answers for the executive summary questions, at least. I was excited to see that they finally made changes that tell a better full narrative of your team, rather than answering to a question or figuring out a strategic way to answer around the question with somehow kind of answering it.
Oh my gosh, Kristine, like that just brings me back to build season or like working on chairmans again and just think like I was just like teleported to a time when you're like, oh my gosh, this question doesn't let me talk about my
Yes.
strengths or like talk about the things I want to talk about.
And I think for a long
it's-
time that deterred teams
ahead.
from even applying for the award. When they're looking at it, they're like, oh my gosh, FLL, FTC, family of programs, like sponsors, like, oh, like how could I even be mildly eligible for that? And honestly, I think just that list of questions before alone did not really give a good introduction or scaffolding for teams to work from to develop their 10,000 character submission. Like I always tried when we're talking about like strategies for how to like tackle this thing, I always at least tried to get them to deal with the executive summary first because it is painful. And if you're able to condense something into such a short answer, you're able to also then like add to it later. But for those who haven't seen the change to the 13 questions, I bravo to everybody at headquarters that had been working on this. I know Cindy and Alan, our lead JAs there, had done that, but also I know Fiona Hanlon, who is an FRC alumni, was working like hand in hand with them to really push for this because those questions before were so confusing. But the one that I'm really excited about is the one that's listed second. It said, describe your community along with how your team addresses its unique opportunities and circumstances. Like, thank you. That is the best thing that I've like seen in a while. Well, not a while, but up until I would say about 11 a.m. my time today. Seeing that they really give you an opportunity to just be like, we're from this type of like, you know, place. Like my students are from all over the city where we have teams in New England that are from literally middle of nowhere, Maine, and it takes them 8 hours to get to any close event. Like those are two very different experiences that were never really given a chance in that like condensed narrative to really explain before. So I'm pretty pumped for that change alone and the rest of the questions that they've really worked to make useful instead of just answering to statistics, I guess.
This is actually a really good segue into my next question about how do you strategize showing what makes your team unique? Like, what are the key points of your submission and how do you present, how do you make sure you present these points to represent like what your team's about and what makes you unique? Like just moving on from the format, if anybody would like to go first.
When I work with teams, we always do Rush's 3 buckets strategy. It's pretty like well known, I think, like in the chairman's community. And whenever I was a student, we didn't do that, but I found that as a mentor, it really helps students get a good idea of like how to structure things. Like you said, Kristine, you know, there's not a lot of guidance for how to write an essay for chairmans. And so I've found that that's always been really helpful. And I think that it also helps get the points that you're trying to make across to the judges. And if people aren't familiar with the 3 buckets, it's just a like method that like Rush developed that involves just picking like organizing all of your content that your team does into like 3 unique categories and then kind of building off of that. Yeah.
I think for our team, we just do a big outline, right? We start throwing things probably into buckets, but it feels like there's more than 3. And then start working our way kind of through a story. And I think, you know, anybody who's writing for chairmans has to be a good storyteller because you want the judges, and when you're presenting, you want them to want to hear your story, right? So you have to throw all the stats in there and the things that you've done, and you've got to, you know, you don't want to do the origin story, but you definitely want to be able to tell them why your team is special and what they've done for their community. And I think a good storyteller can do that with facts and figures as well as the anecdotal information. And so we just start kind of walking through like what things are going to be important to us. We've submitted a lot, so you don't want to tell the same story over and over again, right? So you have to refresh your story. Also, I mean, what are the cool things that you've done that maybe people don't know and they want to hear? And back to that question in the executive summary, I love that because that's a good kickoff for actually starting your essay, right? What's cool about your team? What's unique about your team? Tell us who you are. I think that's a great start. what story do we want to tell, and how important is it to us, right?
I just want to throw in one other factor that we always think about is the student's voice, who's actually writing it and who's actually presenting it. Because for the person who's doing it, is there something that they're passionate about, something that really grabbed onto them that they can really talk about? It's easier to write something when it's something that you are already excited about. Whereas we know that there are certain things that we've done as a team, things that we want to incorporate in. But if you're, especially if you're a newer student coming into a team and maybe joining chairman's, that might be a great team story, but it's not a personal story. And so then it can lose a little bit in the translation.
Oh, Foz, I remember when I was a student, like being really excited about the things that made our submission strong. And I was a student who was on the both ends of writing and presenting. And I could actually like viscerally feel the difference when I would be talking about the things that make 3309 so awesome versus like the things that I wasn't so interested about. And ultimately, that's what the judges gravitate towards is what are you excited about and why does it impact people through, like Karen was saying, the anecdotes and the facts and the figures.
I think it's interesting too, because in your essay versus your presentation, your essay is the story of your team, and it might be the bigger, broader, things that you've done, and it's over a larger period of time. But your presentation has to be personal, right? Your presenters have to connect to the information. The people listening to you have to be interested in what you're saying. And your presenters have to have some kind of chemistry, really, because they have the unique job of trying to tell the story of your whole team and the history of your team. And to your point, they might be freshmen. I've had freshmen present. And sometimes it's funny, the judges know when they're freshmen and will recognize that they're freshmen, but you want them even as newbies on the team to connect to the information. So I think that personal story or even what brought them to the team is always really attractive to judges, but it's authentic. And that's why I think it's attractive.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Something that we always stress about the presentation is that is the only face-to-face time that you have to like really connect with them. We always try to leave certain things that we wouldn't totally negate them from any other written or submitted like part, but we would leave it in the written submission in a way that would kind of lead into wanting to know more and getting that in the face-to-face interaction. Something that I'm going to attempt to screen share. Just going to warn everybody, I'm an art teacher and I'm working hybrid, so I'm not doing the full remote thing. And my students are watching me use a smartboard for the first time going room to room, but I'm about to screen share because I wanted to show you guys something that we do on 125 at the executive summary. This is last year's executive summary question.
You did it.
You can feast your eyes. Did I do it? I didn't break it. Yes. All right. So this is something that we figured out probably about 4 years ago when I was in my like second year with the Neutrons. So before I was with the Neutrons, I was with Team 126, who oddly enough is not geographically as close as you'd think they would be. They're out in Clinton, Massachusetts, which is where the spork was invented. But this is eventually, like, I realized that the most difficult thing is to really get students to, at that time, to differentiate between all of these very similar questions that we eventually, once we realized like, okay, we have the data here to really do something and like really maybe like put a good submission together. Cause we always try to look at just the raw data and facts first. Like when we looked at each of these questions, we first tried to bold, okay, what are we actually looking at in this question so we don't get too confused? Then what we would do afterwards is figure out, okay, what are the absolute takeaways that need to come from the answer of this question? And that at least helped, like once the students would like list off the takeaways. And this was a good way for us to be able to siphon off work to have students work independently, whether or not they were veterans or newer students, because they could at least take like, okay, I need to try to pinpoint like things about this specific bolded stuff. And they could get like a list of things because this takeaways column was really just supposed to be like a fact or a topic or a data point. It was not supposed to be anything like lengthy. And then we were able to kind of make sure that it wasn't repeated anywhere else. And we were able to see like which questions had too much like to take away from it, and where could we siphon it off further down. And then to the right, we had students just kind of go in and fill in their like first go at a response. And then somebody could go and add some like revisions or notes, and then the student could then go next to it and add in their revision. And then once we start a new year, what we do is try to take, okay, this is last year's response. They're not allowed to use it at all, but they're allowed to strip out the data points or anything that they thought was successful. And we review like really what didn't go well. So this format for us, like, because I don't really know how to use sheets, I work out of tables, which is not ideal, but this layout at least is really clear and to the point, which is one thing that we realize, like, it's really difficult to keep data from a team that does a lot for a long period of time, like organizing that data. And like, we have to do it at some point, but it's not organized enough to just rely on being able to find it somewhere and reference one thing. So we tried to keep our submission form, or our submission that we were working on together, like as kind of clear and concise as possible. And this was a way for us to also like make copies of this and send it out to 4 or 5 different people and get their kind of take on it. Like, and that for us was probably the most helpful starting point, because after we got this at least like 3/4 of the way done, we could at least start looking at where do we go from here? Like, what stuff could we not really put in there that's like not data, and start giving, like everybody else is saying, the story of our team like into the essay itself. So I'm excited to do this this coming season with these new questions, because I think it will be a better balance of being able to give a data point and something that's a little more personal, rather than just all this, like, I don't know, before it was so tailored to like, what are you doing for the first program? And like, I'm going to ask you to tell me what you're doing with other first teams for other first families of program. Like, it was ridiculous. So I'm excited to see that the students will be able to do this and like focus on the things they care about more, rather than trying to check all the boxes of this executive summary. But this is how we operate, and it's I think it's on our team website or on the Compass Alliance website, but we've shared it out to other teams. And even for teams that are like really old to this process, or if there's like newer students or mentors, like this is a great kind of clear and concise way to tackle it, or at least try to break it down and get everybody to figure out or agree to on your team, like, what is this question really asking? And what is it that we want to provide as like the answer to it, or the starting point, I guess.
Thanks so much, everyone, for sharing. There are many ways that you can go about doing this. And I definitely recommend that for our viewers out there, you have a particular strategy for your own team that works best for you. But the general consensus that I'm hearing from everyone is that you want to pick the things you care about that have the most impactful data to back up why it's so meaningful. For our next question, covering the strategy portion, is what do you think are some of the greatest impediments to being competitive in chairmans, and what do you think makes this award challenging to earn?
I'll say from a district standpoint, it's been interesting. Like, I was on a team that was competing for it in the regional model a long time ago. And that was really difficult, especially before, when you had one chance to submit and present to judges, which always just really got under my skin as a student that was involved with both the robot and like non-tech or more than robot stuff. I was really happy to see that first was like, all right, you get to play until you win, or you just keep playing and then you try again next season, because that's really how it should be, especially because your entire team is contributing to this year round. This isn't you're building your robot, you're putting it on the field, and then at the end of the season, like, you're building a new robot. It's like you're going to keep doing what you're doing off the field. And the fact that we can finally compete as somewhat often with our non-robot things, I think is fantastic. But in a district model, I found that you're bumping into the same judges, you're competing against teams that are from a particular state, and something very specific will resonate with like a judge. So it's always a dice roll. I try to tell our students, like, if you can walk into, like, if you can hit the submit button, walk into the judging room and walk out and like feel good, have some fleck of like, man, like we did it, all right, it's over, like that was good, then that's good. If you don't win, there are too many factors to feel like it was your fault if you felt good walking out. If you rushed and like didn't come in prepared, then yeah, like that's on you. But I would say that for us, like we try to not look at the external factors because you can't have any control over them, and there's no real, like you don't know what they are. So it's not even worth really focusing your time and energy on them.
Yeah, just gotta put all your money on the table and have it be that. I agree with that philosophy. Yeah. Yeah,
I
go
think
ahead.
for us, it's a lot about doing the outreach that's authentic to your team, right? Not doing outreach for chairmans, but doing it because it's right for your team, it's right for your community, and then being able to tell that story. And I think an impediment to being successful in that is when you start doing things because you think it might be something the judges want to hear, right? When you start like, oh, did we do enough this year? And being nervous about, are you competitive? I think you submit because you want to submit, you tell your own story, but you don't run up your outreach just so you can check a box, right? And
Yes.
when you get in that like
Thank
headspace,
you.
then it gets crazy.
Then then you shouldn't be doing it. Like
Right.
that is, thank you. Like I just love when other people say that, because I feel like I'm the nut job in New England that's saying that, and people are like, what? You're just saying
Yeah,
that for the
don't
sake
join
of
me.
chairman. So I'm like, oh my God, I already have a world chairman's medal from like 2000, whatever. But it's so true. It's like, if you focus on like, what is that thing that you care about? And sometimes you don't even know what it is as a team. Like,
Right.
that's something that's a good starting point. It's like, what are we doing? Or like, what are we getting the most excited about? What do we dread most as a team? It's like, why, honestly, like if it's running that FLL qualifier, then don't do it. Partner with another team and then make it less miserable for yourself. Don't do it because everybody else around you is doing it. Like we were given the opportunity to go to China, but guess what? It did not work out for all of us because it just wasn't in the deck of cards. And I remember all these other teams in New England were getting the invite, and like a bunch of teams went, which I think was fantastic. And there were people that were like, man, do you think we're gonna not get chairmans because we didn't go to China like all these other teams? And I was like, do you really think that matters? Like the fact that I had a student ask me that, I was like, oh God, like that's not good. But yeah, it's, if you focus on what you like to do, you're gonna keep doing more and more and more of it, and it's gonna go really, really, really well.
But I also think too, if you do the things that are authentic and you're good at them, then people invite you to do more because they see that you're successful and they see that you're gonna carry the torch in the right way, right? You get invited because they think you can manage whatever activity. We've been invited to some really cool activities because we show up, we come in force, right? Like if we say we're gonna do it, we'll be there. And I think then those invites kind of snowball and create new opportunities for your team. And that's the cool stuff that I think the kids like to do. Some of it you have to do because it's the right thing. Maybe your school's doing something, or maybe your community asks you for some outreach help and you do that. But as long as we're not checking a box, I think we're happy to participate.
Yeah, and I mean, I think speaking to that, most of the teams that I've worked with all the teams I've worked with are from Title I schools, but a lot of teams in Arizona in particular are from Title I schools, low resource. Like Tucson is 1 in 4 people are below the poverty line, 35% of families speak a language other than English at home. And it can be really tempting, I think, for teams to try and look at what Hall of Fame teams are doing, what really well-resourced teams are doing, and say like, oh, well, we need to do that. I know a lot of people like a couple of years ago were really concerned with kind of like what you said, Kristine, with, like international outreach. And then now there's a really big thing with advocacy. And then there were other things before that. And those are all like really great things to do, but they're not right for every single team. Like with my teams, we always try and focus on the immediate community because there is so much need, and it resonates so much better with the students whenever they can work with people who are their community, who look like their families and things like that. So it really comes down to focusing on,
and I think especially like teams need to hear that now more than ever, because it's that weird, like in Boston, we haven't seen our kids since March, or maybe, yeah, actually before we were going to New Jersey. But they've been home. They have not gone into school. But then we have teams that are in our district that are able to go into their shops and they're able to, 3D print PPE. And a lot of our students were feeling this weird, like, we're letting like our communities down. We're not able to really go and support them. And it was like, no, it's okay. Like, we have a different set of circumstances. Just like if it weren't a pandemic, there's no reason to say like we should be doing this or that based on the optics of another team or what other people are doing. Like, it's great that some people can do that, but I think the pressures that we sometimes feel from like social media, which is true in our lives in general, but I would say especially when we have districts and stuff supporting like print 1 million PPE and do this and that, and it's like I was happy to see the changes because it will be able to let teams showcase not just data points and stuff from a certain like thing that they're doing, but kind of give the full picture of like, we live in this demographic and this is what things have been like for us. And this is what we were able to do, like, regardless of it. And I think Kinney's point to giving back to the people in your own community so they can see, people that are like them and a part of their community, like supporting them rather than reaching out further than what's in front of them is super important.
I think it's more important to do that than to reach past your community, because honestly, that's where your kids came from. That's your audience, right? Of kids that could potentially become interested in STEM, or families who don't know anything. And honestly, when you're from a Title I school, that's an opportunity for those kids to get involved in something that can lead to something much greater in their lives, right? Scholarships for college, the ability to imagine themselves in any type of STEM career that maybe they wouldn't have been exposed to previously. So that at-home outreach, I think, is so important.
All right, I will move on to our first question of the student focus portion. I feel like a game show host. But the first one is, what ways does your team best support the students who work on your submission? Especially when you think about, like, maybe Kristine mentioned that students who work on the robot or work on the submission, like, or outreach, and like, how do you either integrate the two or support students who just have a different type of interest? Maybe Fuzz, if you want to go first, I'd be interested to see how 4201 has like changed in more recent times.
Absolutely. And I really do appreciate what everyone said in the other question there too, because I think it comes hand in hand, because there is a lot of nervousness sometimes, especially when students are looking at social media or looking at other teams and saying, oh my God, they're doing all of this, we need to be doing that too. And being able to pull back from that and say, this is what we do in our team. This is what we're excited about. This is how we could impact our community. Now let's turn that into our submission. Let's turn that into our essay. Let's turn that into our interview that we're doing. So how do we support? It's honestly a lot harder right now because we're remote. It's difficult to keep engaged, to make sure everyone's doing okay. If there's an issue, like if we're all working together in a lab or in a workshop environment, if somebody's struggling, you could see it, right? I could be walking around and I could see somebody is hitting a roadblock or struggling, and we can have a discussion. Now it's like an asynchronous type of activity where here's an assignment, here's what you're trying to do, and I don't know if the person's struggling unless the person says something. So what that's turned into for us is a lot of check-ins, like making sure that we're checking in on a regular basis, scheduled check-ins, unscheduled check-ins. Shout out, I think some other teams mentioned this, alumni mentors who came back. We have a bunch of very amazing alumni mentors who've come in and who's taken on a lot of that responsibility to engage with the students, engage with the team, and making sure that they have the background and they're checking in to ensure that everything is happening within a reasonable timeline. You always create a timeline, you always blow past it. That's just how things work. But if you could continue that engagement, then you can make sure that things are moving forward.
Yeah, that brings up a really good point about how one-on-ones can be so critical to learning and maybe even be an advantage in some regard to this strange world we're all living in. Another 971 mentor, Austin Shu, shared something in our Slack the other day about how they've actually increased like the engagement that they've had with students because they've been able to be so much closer because of check-ins like you were mentioning. So if anyone else would like to answer this question as well about like how to support your students right now, that would be awesome to hear from.
Sure. Yeah, we have mentors actually assigned to each part of our chairman's team. So we're fortunate enough to have an author on our team as a mentor. He's also an engineer and he's an author on the side. So he manages and works with the team that's writing. I have a training background, and so I typically help coach presenters. We have another mentor who sits with the students working through the executive summary questions. And then we are also fortunate to have an alumni mentor who, a couple of them who are fantastic at video and photography who work on the video side. And so we kind of split it up into, it's a small team, but we split it up into even smaller teams. And I think that one-on-one, you're sharing skills, but you're allowing newer students to gain new skills because you're not necessarily relying on them to do the whole activity. You've got a group of kids and you've got, we usually have like a seasoned somebody, a senior or a junior on the team. And then the newer kids are learning those skills so you can kind of hand that activity off to them the next year. And I think that one-on-one seems to work well because it's a short time frame and it's super stressful. And I've seen kids drop out if they don't feel like they have enough support or they feel lost or it's just too much. And it's also during a busy school time too. So, your seniors are getting ready and finishing their college apps, and it can be very, very stressful for a small team.
The teams that I've worked with, we always work really collaboratively on pretty much all aspects of chairman's, like on 1011, our biggest team, we had like 50 students and maybe a total of like 20 students had a hand in the chairman's process at some point, which was like really amazing. And we were able to include so many voices. It was really, really great. But generally, we just sort of will either, if we don't have enough student interest in working on chairmans, we like to make it like a team project. So like if we don't have enough interest in students working on chairmans, we might just make a meeting in November, December, just a chairman's meeting, and everybody who shows up just has to work on chairman's. And that way it kind of shows, it kind of makes it, because a lot of the time chairman's presenters are going into another room, they're going somewhere else, or people writing the chairman's presentation or chairman's submission, they're going into another room, the team isn't seeing what they're doing, they're kind of getting removed from the shop. So it's sort of this like peripheral like work that people are doing. And so we always really try to like center it in the team. And then that doesn't mean that like 15 kids have to be super committed to working on it all the time. Like usually it's like 1 to 3 students who are super interested in it, really want to do it. And then, we just try and include as many people as possible in the actual writing process. So we just do like a Google Doc, put it on a projector in a classroom. People come in and out and sit, if they want to break from the shop for an hour, they'll sit and help us like write a paragraph in the chairman's essay or whatever. And so no one's really ever working on it like by themselves with the teams that I've worked with in the past.
We started doing something for this last season at the start of our FRC season, which was around the end of November, where we tried to get more of a full team involvement for this past season, at least to get people engaged with kind of where things ended last season, like what our submission was, and then have more of a group discussion kind of on what we would like this past season submission to be. So something new that we did that was actually really successful, we broke the entire team up, both mentors and students, returning and new, and the alumni that were just kind of mingling in between. We broke everybody up into like groups of about 4 or 5 students, and then at least like 3 mentors, because we had enough at the time. And we had everybody read through the submission. We read through the executive summary as a team, popcorn style reading, which our students are very into when we're in person. And then we gave everybody the challenge of they had like 10 minutes to read through, and then they had 15 minutes to develop like a 2-minute pitch on like our team. And then we gave them, I think, the challenge of like, you have 30 seconds to explain like not why we should win chairmans, but like what you would say to somebody if you had to give an elevator pitch that would win us chairmans. And it was a really interesting process that eventually pinpointed students we would have never guessed were incredibly like just great at speaking, like fly by the seat of their pants speaking. And I just remember texting like the newer mentor that we had gotten for chairmans, who was like an all-star mentor from like Jamie Luce's team when they started like all of FRC in Maine back in the day. But I texted her, was like, OMG, like just found 5 new presenters that are underclassmen. Like it was a great exercise that didn't really require much prep time, and it got people to really read through every single word without totally tuning out. And it got people to like, they had to pick 2 to 3 presenters, and everybody had to contribute to some capacity, and they had to speak in front of the team. So it was a good exercise to get both students and mentors like engaged with it. And it got some students interested in different facets of like contributing to like gathering up data or working on like our judge book and other stuff. But the way that we operate in terms of like keeping track of what we're doing, we developed this like master spreadsheet that we kept track of like all the different data points, kind of buckets that we were looking at. We were able to kind of keep a workflow of like who was working on what, who was reviewing what. And it really helped us be able to work remotely, because we were only meeting in person on the Neutrons 2 times a week this past season, not because of COVID. It was pre-COVID where we were meeting 2 times a week at our new shop, but we were meeting remotely like through Slack and through Zoom 2 other times a week, and sometimes 3 other times a week. And we would meet on the weekend. So our chairman's team, we were able to get the students to actually be more involved with the robot this year like they wanted to be, rather than just staying in a classroom and working on chairman stuff, because we had realized like they enjoyed doing that to some capacity, but then in hindsight, they really wish they had been at least like in the room working on the robot a little more, because of course we always miss those great moments of like robot shot the first ball and we're like, oh, were those people locked away doing character counts again? Like we miss the robot. But this year, being able to at least do that full exercise as a team got the students to see like the full perspective of the team's feeling about how, like what our story was, what we cared about, or what they understood about the team. We also went through the chairman's like overview with the team, because obviously not every student and mentor is aware of it, but it was a new process for us as a team that a lot of people wanted nothing to do with. And I told them, great, if you don't want to participate, then if we win this year, you can gladly sit in the stands, because I mean, it's either get on board or don't. Like it's a full team effort. And everybody was like, yeah, that's definitely the attitude. I was like, all right, that's good that everybody was receptive to that. But I would recommend doing that if you're really not sure where to start, at least with like maybe trying to find new people that would be interested. We haven't started much chairman stuff this year. We are meeting remotely for FTC, or we're meeting virtually for FTC right now. We're really going to let the kids kind of settle in with getting like a cadence with their FTC stuff, and then kind of start poking at getting a good mentor foundation for this year, because it's a totally new process with not being able to meet in person at all. But like everybody else had said, we're really checking in with the students frequently. We do that pretty often anyway, but they've been like, our students have literally been locked at home for months, and we're definitely dying to see them and like do robot things, but they've been able to kind of really keep momentum going, and it keeps us going, that's for sure. I can't wait to actually like get back to some sort of normal, but in the meantime, I think like the thing that we did at the beginning of last year is something we'll definitely do again this year, but remotely. Breakout rooms are a thing, so can certainly go do that. But yeah, that's the 125 effort of like, let's try something new to see if it yields anything. Like
I love
good.
that, especially for the trying out of new presenters, because if you don't really know you're trying out, right, it's less stressful when people come to try out. Well, first of all, they don't even want to do it, but when they do, I mean, they just look petrified, and you got to feel for them. But in this group situation, honestly, you find people who are amazing at telling a story just because they are, and they don't necessarily know it.
Or
And that's-
dynamics, like
Right.
people that you didn't realize like could feed off of somebody else, like that if they just had somebody that was a little more confident or like was the go-getter, like they could jump right in. And like we used to be able to pinpoint that at demos, but I was happy to see that that was like a really like you can plan kind of testing that out and not be at a demo for it or something.
love
And it's
that.
good with mentors too, because we were kind of able to identify like what mentors were able to kind of switch gears from being like a very technical mentor or a very like linear thinking person with their skill sets that were able to connect with the students and get them to kind of engage in like either stay on track or try to look at things a different way or explain like the award to them. Because we get a lot of FRC alumni who either like to oversell like their skill sets, which there's no reason for it, or don't feel like they can try something new either. That was something that it was interesting to see some of the like more technical mentors like really getting the kids like engaged, and we were able to kind of pull them back with the review process like later on in the season to really like grill the kids when we had some sort of tangible submission. So it really got us to pinpoint how to like, I don't know, like take people that typically would just kind of sit back during a chairman's like presentation of the team and be like, cool guys, and get them more involved and like really kind of ramp up the rest of the team. Because when people see people that like usually would it like are, I don't know, like somebody they look up to maybe on the mechanical side of things, like step outside of their typical boundaries and go get excited about that, it obviously leads everybody else to do the same thing. So
Absolutely.
highly recommend.
One of your other
I love
points,
it.
like a lot of the time, you know, if you don't have enough people interested to do like formal tryouts, which is always beneficial. If you have a lot of kids who want to do it, like do tryouts, we would take like an afternoon and just like spend time doing different presentation formations, doing Q&A, seeing who was interested. But if you don't have time for that, like I always say that, you know, a lot of the time the best presenter isn't necessarily the best person for chairmans. A lot of the time it's just the student who like cares the most about the team, like the student who has the most unique perspective. Like, you know, sometimes I'll go to the other mentors and be like, oh, this really, really quiet student who literally says 3 words at a meeting, I think would be absolutely brilliant on chairman's. And then everybody's like, oh, I don't really know what you're talking about. And then you just do it. And then they see like, yeah, this person gets super excited when they're talking about chairman's. They just kind of needed to have that confidence boost for someone to say like, oh, you would actually be really good at that.
Yeah.
And then you can really pinpoint students who maybe don't feel so involved and kind of rope them into doing chairman's and finding something they're really passionate about.
I just want to say, I hope I speak for our viewers when I say that I feel like I've learned a lot from all the different strategies that you all have employed in your different cities and schools. We're just going to move on to our last question for tonight about your perspective on being a mentor and working on the Chairman's Award. I would really like to hear how your perspective on Chairman's has changed from when you first started being a mentor to what it is today, and maybe just tell us a little bit of your story and like how working on Chairman's as a mentor has impacted you. I'd just like to hear like your biggest thoughts of the award.
I'll go ahead and start. Yep.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, you know, it's really interesting because this is first is a competition of some sort, and there's always a lot of focus about, you know, can you win? Can you be ranked high? Are you going to score the most points? And I really like what we were talking about earlier, where, you know, chairman's is something where you need to feel good about your submission, and there's so many factors involved with the decision process there that it's most likely not you. It's not you or your team, what you did that will contribute to whether you win or not. There's a lot of factors out there. So I guess one of the biggest things is understanding the true meaning of what this award means and what FIRST is trying to do. What is your impact on the community? How are you making the world a better place? And if you can identify that for your team and identify goals for your team, then chairman's just falls out of that. You shouldn't have to force yourself to get to that position. It should be what you are naturally trying to do to make a difference, and then take that and be able to present it in some way. And so I think that perspective has helped me and helped my team, and also helped me in my outlook in my job too.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think for me, when I started, chairman's was terrifying. I mean, I was a parent, they needed some help. I said I would do it. I'm in business. I can help somebody write something. I've, managed trainers and been a trainer before. And when you're trying to check all the boxes and you start with the executive questions, it's terrifying. You're like, oh, wait, we didn't do that. Oh my gosh, we didn't do that either. Oh, why are we even submitting for this award? And now I think we just settle back and we do what we do best. And if people are interested in how we do it or are interested in our story, cool, great. But we're always gonna, our school is a boys Catholic school. We're all about service to the community. And when people ask us to help, we help. We have been lucky enough to have some really amazing young ladies on our team. And if people find themselves without a team, we're happy for them to join us. We're lucky enough to have, amazing shop space and some really cool mentors and really cool sponsors. And so I think that's the story we like to tell, is that, we're very inclusive and we're very about our community and service. And that makes it less scary, right? When you're trying to check the boxes, it's super scary. And when you're new, it's terrifying. But I think now I look at it and I just think we just need to do great things that resonate with us as a team. And then we have a cool story to tell. And so I think my perspective has flipped whenever anybody asks me, how do you get started? What does your submission look like? It's like, take a deep breath and just talk about your team and the cool things you do that make you different, that, how you're helping people in your community, how you're helping your school, what your kids are about, and you'll have a great story to tell.
I'm gonna chime in on Karen's because it kind of resonated with me when she was saying that it the getting the students to tell their story. So I will say my experience, even in the last five or 6 years, however long I've been with this team, with the Neutrons, my perspective, at least in how I approach chairmans or see chairmans now, is totally different, or it's totally more of a vehicle, just like the robot, to get our students to really value themselves more. Because before I joined the team, the year before, in 2014, was the Neutrons' very first ever Chairman's Award win. And it was at the Pine Tree District, which was the very last district that they were competing at. And they were one of the last teams that was checks in all the boxes at this. Not to say that they totally didn't kick butt. There were 3 girls that totally kicked butt when they went in and gave their presentation. However, our team was still seen as just this hooligan bunch of city kids that would come in and the mentors built the robot, which I can assure you they do not, because a lot of them just spend time arguing about my team did it best. Brr, brr, brr. But anyway, so it was a really great opportunity for us to be actually, we work our butts off, and we've been working our butts off to provide great things to the entire New England district for a really long time. And when I kind of reframed this being an opportunity to remind people or really showcase what the team had been doing for so long with nobody even noticing, and how they were really gaining momentum with no real tangible need for an award. So for me, it was a really great way to get the team to kind of channel their frustration with the circumstances of just not great experiences at events for one reason or another. And it really got the team to realize our true things that we were caring about, our characteristics as a team. And my greatest fuzzy moment of success for a season was when the students decided that they wanted to base the essay around our team characteristics and how they paralleled minorities in STEM that made significant changes despite massive obstacles. And I was wow, I'm gonna go cry in a closet for 5 hours over how amazing you guys all are. But for me, that was the aha moment. It was yes, you can use this as an opportunity to showcase wow, we're really great kids, and we're doing really hard work and making big changes. And we recognize that the people that we've looked up to and learned about. Like, it was a really great moment, and it's something that has totally rocketed like the momentum of our team continuing to like just focus on ourselves and not everything else going on around us. So it's nice to hear like that all of you use this as like a vehicle for storytelling, because students don't get that opportunity much otherwise, especially when it comes to like showcasing like the smaller moments that they get to highlight in their chairman's submission or showcase with the judges. I think is like super important, because not everybody, like not every kid gets asked about their day or, you know, what they're doing on the robotics team. Like, I can tell you we've only met maybe
Kristine,
3 of
I'm
our
so
students'
sorry.
parents.
I'm so
but
sorry to cut
we're gonna
you
wrap
off.
up, right?
Yeah, we're
Yep.
gonna wrap up. I want to hear what Kinney has to say, but we do have to do some stuff
No,
at
it's
5
all
o'clock.
good, because
So
I definitely just
sorry
saw the
about that.
clock.
No worries. Go ahead, Kinney.
I'll go quick. Yeah, I mean, whenever I was a student on chairman's, I definitely wanted to win. And you know, I don't think there's anything wrong with students wanting to win. Like Karthik says, like building robots is fun, but it's more fun when you're winning. And you know, I think that that's healthy to an extent, because it does have a good end, as long as it's not exclusively about that, which is maybe controversial, but and you know, but like as I got into a mentorship role, you know, I really kind of see it as a way for students to tell narratives about themselves. Like I said, I mostly work with, you know, I went to a Title I school. My students go to Title I schools, public schools. And yeah, a lot of them aren't represented in STEM. A lot of them don't have parents who are engineers. A lot of them don't even have any intention of doing that anyways. You know, whenever I was a student, I didn't think I was going to go to college. And so I really see it as a way for students to tell narratives about themselves and about how they are making a place for themselves in their community. And I always tell my students, like, you know, this is your chance to advocate for yourselves, to tell your story, to tell a narrative about yourself and what you're doing. And a lot of students, I think, have gone on to use that in the future, you know, as organizers and in their careers and things like that. And we have a great role model in Arizona, in 842, who have kind of done things not the way that most other chairman's teams do, and they do really focus on advocacy. And so I think that that's really informed, and the work that like Freddie does has really informed my understanding of chairman's as a mentor.
Thank you so much, everybody. We're going to be really quick because history is in the making. I do want to tell everyone, like in summary, Chairman's is about telling your story. No matter what, you have a story to tell, so do it. Be the nerd, embrace it, and you can do anything, and Chairman's is a vehicle for that. Thank you so much, everybody. It was a real pleasure, and I'm handing it off to Pauline.
Thank you. Thank you guys again for being our panelists. I know I learned quite a lot from all of you guys, so thank you again for joining in.